Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Abdullah Kam, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create pivot tables correctly in Excel. There is something important we need to discuss first, and this is covered in part 1, which is data structure. So we're going to talk about how the data should be set up first. It needs to have, some structure to it. And so we're going to discuss, flat versus cross tables, basically, so you can understand, which is which. And then we're going to talk about data granularity because, data granularity is important, for the final results in the pivot table. And then we're going to talk about the pivot tables themselves. What is a pivot table and what, pivot tables requires in order to be, something useful to us. And we're gonna take a tour of the basic components of pivot tables, and then we'll move to actually creating pivot tables. And I included here only the calculations that I find myself most of the time using. There are some other calculations and features, but I see them as extras. And another important thing that we're going to talk about is how to format pivot tables, because formatting pivot tables correctly with custom number formatting and conditional formatting will actually make the pivot tables easier to use and easier to understand, and it will be more helpful in decision making. So this is a concept that is very useful to you when you create pivot tables, because pivot tables rely on a data source, and understanding the table types available to us can help us create the correct pivot table. So in general, there are two types of tables, and there is the flat table and there is the cross table. And this is just a very simple terminology so everybody understands. The only difference between the two is basically the way we read them. So the one on the left side, the flat table, this is similar to a database table, and you get the full information when you read the whole row, and the whole row is called a record. Imagine an employee table. So each row actually contains the information on just one employee. On the other hand, if we look at the right side, the cross table, the way we read the cross table is we actually cross between the column header and a row header. And this is very similar to using a catalog. So you cross both the column header and row header and you arrive at the intersection between the two. And this gives you the information you need. So the source for the pivot table should be a flat table. And both tables can contain the same information. So let's see how that actually shows here. And so as you can see on the left side, we have the flat table. On the right side, we have the cross table. Both tables here contains the same information, which is the distance between two cities. And as you can see, the cross table is a summarized table, and it's a much easier to read than the one on the left. So although the information is the same, both tables are different in the way they are designed. And so this is what you need to understand and keep in mind. So flat table is the source of data that you're going to use to create the pivot table. And the cross table is actually going to be our pivot table. So it's safe to say that the cross table is a product of the flat table, or a view, a customized view of the flat table. Another very important concept is the data granularity. So the data granularity is basically how detailed is your data, because you need to understand, is it a transactional data? Is it a daily summary? What does each row represent? So the data sources, or the flat tables that we rely on as a data source to create pivot tables, they have single granularity. This is something that you keep in mind always. If it has different granularities within the same table, then you cannot use it in a pivot table and expect to get good results. So the flat table, which is the source of the data, have, single granularity, single detail. So we have three examples here. So the first example is the blue table, and this is actually a very granular table because it contains the date and time showed. So this is actually a transactional table. So it's basically like when you go to a supermarket and they start peeping, every product that you bought. So every time they use the barcode reader, there is a row that gets created in the table. So it's transactional. So understanding the detail, or what is the detail in your table, is very important. And then if we move to the next table, this is a summarized view. So this is a summary for the day for a certain product. So this is how we can explain what the row is. So we say this is a daily summary of the total sales of each product. And this is why you can see here average unit price. In the first table we get unit price because this is transactional. In the second table we have to calculate the average unit price so we get the correct total. And same for the other table here, and all of these are flat tables, by the way, and so because we're reading the whole row. And this is a monthly summary now, okay, and you can see the month and then the product. So this is the total sales, or the total monthly sales for each product with a certain quantity. And as you can see again, since this is a summary, we're calculating the average. So understanding the granularity, or the level for granularity in your source table, data source table, or the flat table that you have, that you want to use as a data source to create your pivot table or your cross table, is important. So this is the concepts that I wanted to explain before we delve into creating pivot tables. So what is a pivot table? A pivot table is a matrix or a cross table that is a summarized view or an aggregate view of a table, or also known as a flat table. So what are the requirements for the data source? So the pivot table, since it is a view, this means that it relies on a data source to create the view. And this is what we have explained earlier. So the pivot table requires a flat table as a data source. If the table or the data source is not a flat table, it is hard to create a meaningful and useful pivot table. The more you understand this fact, the better your reporting will be, and it will be much easier every time you do it. Also, at least one of the columns in the flat table need to contain numbers, and only numbers. Otherwise, there's no use for the pivot tables in most cases. There are some benefits that I try to list here that I could think of, and also features. You can read them at your leisure, just self-explanatory. Okay, so let's create some pivot tables. Okay, so this is the data source that we have, and as you can see, this is a flat table. And the first thing we need to do is to tell Excel that this is a flat table. And there is a very good feature in Excel that helps Excel understand that this is a flat table, and it is called Format as Table. So to apply this feature, click anywhere in the table that you have and go to Home, and then from there go to Format as Table and select any color that you like, and then it's gonna try to figure out the limits for your table, and it will give you this check here, check that my table has headers. For us, yes, our table has headers here, so we keep it checked and we click OK. And as you can see here, now Excel understand that this is a table or a flat table, okay? And you can see here that we have now a tab called Table Design, and there are some options and features here that we can apply to this table. And also we have a table name here, and it's good practice to give it a name, and we're going to give it a name called Sales, because this is a sales table. So as we explained before, we need first to describe the granularity of this flat table to be able to understand what are the outputs that we are able to create with the pivot tables. So the first thing we see here that we have a date column and we don't have the time portion. So this is most likely some sales summary of each product because we have the product here. And the subcategory and the category and the color are basically just describing the product. And each row here is a daily summary or the total sales for each product. And to confirm that, you can filter on one product and you will not see any duplicate dates. Okay. So I already know this data set and it is a daily summary of each product. So since the table is formatted as a table and Excel knows that this is a qualified source for our pivot table, we can start creating our pivot table. But there is something missing, which is the total value here. So to create a pivot table, click anywhere inside the table and then go to Insert tab and then go to Pivot Tables here. And there are other options like you can connect to external data source, or you can connect to Power BI if you have a data set in Power BI, or if you have a data model in Power Pivot in your Excel file, you can connect to that as well. But for now, we have a table or range, and basically we do have a table here. So we click, and then as you can see, Excel has actually figured out that you are already in a table called sales. And it's asking us where to create our pivot table, and we choose new sheet. So we click OK. And as you can see now, we have a placeholder here for our pivot table. And if you look on the right side here, you can see all the columns from the flat table, because Excel can see all the columns inside the table that we have formatted as a flat table. So these are the fields that we're gonna drag and drop here in the pivot table space. And if you look here, you can see that we have rows and we have columns, and the intersection between the two is the values. So this is very similar to the cross table example that we showed before, and this explains or proves that pivot tables are cross tables. And the filters here is just you can drop any category here that you can filter the data with. So let's create a simple pivot table. So we can create our table by first bringing the date, and we can drop the dates in the rows. And as you can see here, it was automatically grouped by Excel into years, and then quarters, and then months. This is because automatic grouping is applied. Now, if you right click on it and you say ungroup, it will go back to the way it was, which is very similar to its original value here in the table. So let's keep it this way for a second. As you can see here, we would like to get the sales value, but we cannot get it because we have the unit price and we have the quantity, and we cannot do anything about them here in the table. So let's go back and create a total column. And to do that, let's bring it here just before the product column. And so the way to add a new column between the two columns is just right click on the product here anywhere, doesn't matter, and you go to insert and you say here table columns to the left. So insert table columns to the left, and this is where we get a new column. We can name this column total, and then we create a simple formula that multiplies unit price by the quantity, and we get the total sales. And now when we go back here, you can see that we don't have it, and this is because we didn't refresh our pivot table. So we click or right click here anywhere and we hit refresh, and you can see that we have access to the total column now. We know it's all numbers, so we just drag and drop it into the values. So you can see here now, this shows the total value or the total sales of all the products in each day of the days that are listed here. Now let's group the days again, but this time we're going to do it manually. So you just right click on any of the dates here and you go and you hit group. When you click on group, you get the option to use which categories you would like to group the data on. So we choose years, quarters and months, and we hit OK. And as you can see here, it's all grouped by year, quarter and month. Now let's make the table look a little bit better. So we take the years, we put them into columns, and you can see here that automatically the pivot tables switched positions, and now we have a easier to read table. Now we have an issue with the table here, that we have a grand total that we don't, or that doesn't make sense, so we need to get rid of it because there is no value in adding 3 years of sales into just a single cell. So we right click on grand total and we select remove grand total. And now we have our table here cleaner than before. So let's format the number correctly. So in a pivot table, when you want to format the numbers, you right click anywhere, just one cell inside the table, and then select not format cells. Make sure that you select number format. And when you select number format, any format that you use, it will get applied to all the values here. So we're going to select numbers. We're going to remove any decimal places. We use the 1000 separator here and we hit OK. The numbers are easier to read now again. Now the other thing that we can do is, since all the values here are in millions, we can actually apply some custom formats to make the numbers look much easier. So let's do that right now. I was thinking of actually doing it at the end of the video, but it looks it makes sense to do it now. So let's go ahead and do it now. So we right click again and we go to number format, and we can make these appear in millions if we go to custom here, and instead of having this code just like this, and look at the sample here, if we add a comma, you see that the sample gets as if it's divided by 1000. But the value is the same still, it's just showing that it is divided by 1000. So since we're going to do it in millions, we're going to put another comma there, and you can see here what now we have only 5 millions. But it's better to add one decimal value just to make this look better, or maybe two decimals. And then after that, to show everybody that this is actually in millions, we put between quotation mark the letter M, and we hit OK. And as you can see here, that all the numbers now are in millions. And so you can see that it gets easier and easier to read. We're going to do something to change the design, so we go to the design tab here, and we're going to use a different layout. We're going to use the tabular form, so it looks slightly better. I'm going to go to the view and just remove the design, the grid lines, and then we're going to expand just slightly. Oops. Yeah, it's probably good. And we can also remove the plus and minus buttons here, and we can remove the column headers. Yeah, and there, instead of sum of total, we can say total sales. All right, and let's make this by going to column width. We can make it 10. Yeah, this probably a little bit better. Cool. Now we can do something more by going to right click and go to pivot table options, and from here we hit merge and center cells. So this will merge the cells automatically. And as you can see here, it's get better and better in the way it looks. Okay, so another thing is we can separate quarters by adding a blank line. So we go to design and blank rows there. We insert blank row after each item. Again, it gets easier and easier to look at. And then we can probably do some banded rows, and yeah, this probably work best if we use this view. So this actually a much better view than before, and I think we need to make this 10 again. Yeah. And if you noticed that the columns actually automatically readjusted the size, so we're going to prevent that by going to auto fit column width on update, and we say no, don't auto fit, just keep them the way they are. All right, so now this is our simple pivot table. Next, we're going to create some things that are going to make our table give more information. So let's make our table more useful by creating some advanced calculation. Let's start by creating or calculating the annual growth of sales, of monthly sales. To do that, we go and add the total column again to the values. So now we have two columns that actually displays the same numbers. One just formatted differently. So the one we just added, we just click on any cell. We right click and we go to show values as. And growth is calculated by selecting percentage difference from. So it's going to ask you two questions here, and the selections can be sometimes confusing. So an easy way I find to not forget which one is the correct answer is always think about what is the operation that you are doing. So we are calculating year-over-year growth, and this is why you need to select the years column, okay, from the table basically. So we're gonna use a base field of the years, and the base item we're gonna select previous. There are other options, which is next and or select a single year as a base case, but this is not what we are trying to achieve. We are trying to achieve a year-over-year growth, and this is why we use years as base field and we use previous as base item, because we always compare with the previous year. And when we hit OK, you can see that it gets calculated automatically, and now the percentages here that you see is the year-over-year growth. And a good way for the growth, because growth can be plus or minus, is to make the positive numbers a plus symbol. So to do that, we go again and do some custom formatting. So we go to number format, and from here we go to custom, and you can see that we have the positive value only. So we add a plus to it, and we put a semicolon, and we copy the same code here, just with a minus sign this time. And this is going to give us the code for the negative number. And when we hit OK, you see that every positive number gets added a plus sign, and the minus is minus. To make our report look even better, we're going to add some conditional formatting to it, making any negative value red. So we draw attention to it immediately and make the table easier to read. So we go to home, and don't forget to select at least one percentage or just one cell in the percentage columns. And then we go from home to conditional formatting, and we go to highlight cell rules, and then we need to go to less than, and we just put 0. So anything other than 0, and we don't want the background, just keep the red text. So this is a sample here that we see. So anything below 0, it gets highlighted in red, and we hit OK. So it's applied only to one cell, but we have this little square. We click on it, and it says apply this to all the values, including grand totals and subtotals. or just the intersection between the years and the date, or the months here in this case. So when we hit OK, you can see subtotals are not touched. So only the values of the monthly sales, the growth of it. And as you can see here, immediately you see that 2023 was not a good year. 2022 was much better year in terms of growth from the previous year. And this is an insight we just got just by adding color here. Next up, we need to calculate the contribution of each month's sales to the annual sales. To do that, again, we bring the total column again to the values section there, and we go to the number and we right click on it and we go to show values as, and this time we select percentage of column total. And when we do that, the number of sales, or the number that represents sales, it will get displayed as a percentage of the total column, which is the whole year. For example, this is 51 million here, and which represents 100%. And you can see each month of these is showing how much the percentage that they are contributing to the annual sales of 51 million. Same goes for the quarters also. They actually will show the percentage that they represent from the annual sales. And this is how to calculate the contribution of each month. Another advanced calculation that is very useful in monitoring sales during the year and figuring out where discrepancies happen is the running total, okay, or the year to date when you include years. So to do that, we don't need to bring the total column again into the values, but this time we'll just apply or use the same values that we have to show them as a running total. And the running total is basically just going to be a cumulative total, so a year to date calculation. So we select running total here, and it's just going to ask for the base field, and our base field now is date, which represents the month now. Okay, and we hit OK, and as you can see here, all the numbers are now cumulative, and you can see in December it's gonna be the total sales of the year, as we have seen before. Now this is important because if you create a pivot chart here, just a simple chart, and you will see that it gives you a lot of information just from the chart. And we hit OK, and you can see if we put them together here, I can see clearly that the year 21 was the worst year, but not by far actually. It was actually better at the end of the year compared to the 23, and yeah, slightly better actually. You can see it also from here, and you can see where 23 actually until April, the year 2023 was actually matching that of 2022 until this point in April where they diverged. So 2023 diverged from 2022 sales. So something happened here in April that caused this to diverge from 2022. And if you have this data available to you, and now you are, for example, the manager, and you are in June, and you will see the diversion, you will make a decision here rather than just not knowing about it, and you can see the diversion is actually continuing. So this is where the running total or the year to date calculation is important. And the good thing, pivot tables gives you this information automatically. And even if you add more data to the source table, just right click and hit refresh, and everything gets refreshed when you add new data. So the good thing about it is when you do it once, this is it. You don't have to do it again. It just stays with you, and you can create a dashboard of multiple charts and tables that does that. Next, we calculate the top 5 products. And so to do that, we just bring the product column and we drop it into rows. We take the total column and we drop it into values, and as you can see here, we get the total sales for each product over the 3-year period. We also need to add from pivot table analyze here, we need to add some filters which are called slicers now. So as you can see here, we are interested in the year and the category to filter this table. And so we get the top 5 products in a certain category of our choosing within a certain year. This is the goal. And we hit OK. And as you can see here, we get 2 nice looking boxes. And now what we do to show the top 5 here, or let's say the top 10, actually, it's going to give us much better view because there are a lot of products. So we click on the filter button here. So we come up here and now we select the value filters and we go to the top 10. And when we select the top 10 items, so we are not looking for percentage, we're not looking for the sum, we're just looking for the items by the sum of total. Okay, we hit OK, and you can see here we get the top 10 items or products. And the good thing now, we can filter it by a certain year. So in 2021, these are the top 10 products. 22, these are the ones. 23, these are the top 10. We can now go for 23, for example, in computers, and these are the top 10. Cell phones, these are the top 10, and so on and so forth. And you see how fast that was and how useful this can be in your reporting rather than doing it yourself. There are 2 very important and very useful features in pivot tables. And that is the ability to add new columns and new rows to your pivot table. And you need this sometimes when you would like to make some calculation based on the totals or the summarized value. So let's say we are interested in calculating the profit. Now the issue is we have the total sales, but we don't have the total cost. So we need to create a column called the total cost. So we're going to adjust this to become total sales, and we're going to add another column just before the unit price, and we're going to call it total cost. And we're going to calculate the total cost by multiplying the unit cost by the quantity, of course. And as you can see, we get it calculated. So this is the total cost, and as we seen before, it will not appear here unless we refresh the table. And when we refresh the table, we see that we now get the new columns that we selected. So we are interested in profit for each category. So we take categories, we drag it and drop it to the rows box here. And then we take the total sales and we put it in the values and then the total cost. Okay, we just do a simple formatting here, just make the numbers look good, and we do the same for cost. And okay, so now what we are interested in is calculating the profit based on the totals for each category. So we go to pivot table analyze, and we're gonna add a new column. And in pivot tables here, it is called calculated fields. Okay, and field in general means a column. So we click here, we need to have a name. So the name is going to be profit or total profit. Okay, and the way it's going to be calculated is basically the total sales minus total cost. And although we are selecting the columns from the data source here, it's going to be applied to the totals. And we hit add and then OK. And you can see that profit is calculated for us. All right. And this is how to add a calculated field. All right, and we can probably sort it by value. More sort options, and you can make it by category. And you say no, it is by the sum of total profit. And this is the way you create your table. Always sort your table to hide which ones are the biggest, generating the biggest profit in your business. So let's see how we can add new rows to our pivot table. And I'm showing here the data source because we would like to start fresh. And the reason for that is because the calculated items requires that the pivot tables doesn't have any grouping whatsoever. So if you have created any groups, like the years and quarters and months groups, an automatic grouping, you need to remove it before continuing. So we're starting fresh just to avoid that. So we click inside the table and we hit insert pivot table. and it recognizes that we are in a table called sales, and we're gonna put it in a new sheet. We hit OK, and now we get our pivot table placeholder, and we're gonna construct a simple table based on categories as before. So we take the category and we take the total sales into the values here. We format the numbers and just remove decimals, add separator for the thousands, and sort the values as we seen before. So we sort by descending and then by the total sales. This will sort our table correctly. Always sort your data when you have categories in a table. The only time when you don't sort the data is if your categories are dates, like years or months and things like that. So to add a new item into the categories here, or a new row basically, is let's consider the possibility that for the computers we need to pay a certain percentage to an agent, for example. Maybe we are outsourcing the sales for computers and they take 5%. And we would like to take 5% out of the total sales because this is taken upfront. Okay, so we click on any of the categories here, doesn't matter, just anywhere. And we go to pivot table analyze ribbon there, the tab, and then we go to calculated item. And when we click on calculated items, so you have the field and you have the item. And as you can see, the field is category, the item is all of these, which we have them right there. So what we're gonna say here for the name, we're gonna say agent commission, for example. And then the way we're gonna do it, we're gonna make it a minus, a negative value, and we're gonna take computers, which means it's the value of computers, multiplied by 0.05%. Oh, sorry, it's not percent, it's already 0.05. Okay, so this is the way we're gonna do it, and then we hit OK. And as you can see here, we see that the agent commission is added to our table, and the total is now reduced by this amount. So this is how you add a new item, and it is mostly useful if you are having an accounting system in Excel and you would like to create financial statements like the income statement and the balance sheet. So adding new rows or calculated items really come in handy there. So the last thing we're going to talk about today in this video is how to group numbers into ranges. A common question is how many days we have in each range bucket for total sales. So how many days we sold between 1,000 and 5,000, for example, or between 10,000 and 15,000 and things like that. So it's good to have an idea on where our days are distributed, what should we normally expect, and how we can improve on it. So it's one of the tables that can give more insights on the sales operation. And the way to do that is to first prepare the correct data source. And this is where granularity comes in, because the granularity we have now on our data source is not correct because we have duplicate dates. Duplicate dates because it is the daily sales summary for each product. Okay, and this is why we see different dates, because we have different products. So we need to create a table out of this table that contains only dates and the total sales on those dates. So the way to do it is just we create a pivot table where we drag the date and we drag also the total sale, and we need to get rid of the grouping that we have here. So we right click on it and we say ungroup, and now we have the dates and the total sales. So we can use this data source because dates are not duplicated here, and each number here represents the total daily sales for all the products that we have. And this is what we're gonna divide into ranges and then count how many days fall under each bucket. So the way to do that now is to copy the whole table without the grand total, and then we just copy it, we put it in another sheet, and then we paste values, and then we're gonna format it as table so Excel knows that this is a flat table. We change the headers, make it date, and here total sales or daily sales, probably better. And you see the dates are converted into numbers here because we pasted values. So we just bring it back to short date. And also we're going to give our table, and we're going to call it daily sales. So this is the new data source that we have, and we extracted it from the original data source. So now to get the ranges, we need to create a pivot table. So we go to insert, but we need to make sure that we are clicking inside the table, and then we go to pivot table, and it figures out that we are in a table called daily sales, and we put the pivot table in a new sheet. Now from here we take the daily sales and we drop them into rows, and as you can see, because we dropped the daily sales into rows, it's going to display all the numbers as if they are text. Now to convert the numbers here into ranges, we need to just click on any number here, right click, and then go to group. And Excel figures out the minimum and the maximum of the data that you have in this column, and will give you a hint of what it thinks the step should be. So if we use the numbers here, they have decimals and the range will not look good. And you can check that by just clicking OK here without touching anything. And you can see here, you can hardly read it. So we go back and change this, and we just make it from 0 to, this is 461,000. So let's say we are just interested to up to 400,000, and the rest is going to show as above 400,000. And here we're going to go by not 100,000, let's go by 20,000. That's probably, and you can play around with this until it makes sense. And you can see here we have a line here where it says above 400,000. What is left now is to add a column here where we count the dates. And as you can see here, now most of our days we are actually selling between 100,000 to 120,000. So this is kind of our benchmark. Now also you can put the date in the columns, and you can divide it, and you can see it gets divided by and grouped by date and quarters and stuff. And here you can evaluate each year alone, and also you can put something extra, which is conditional formatting, to make this table make sense. So we click anywhere on the table there, and we go to color scale, and if we go and choose this one, you can see, and we apply it to the intersection between year and the range, and you can see immediately here, and especially if we make it like this, so you can see here where is most of our sales is concentrated. So you can see that most likely we are most of the time working within this range. And this is a good insight, because what you're aiming for is to get this pushed down as far as you can, and you can analyze it even more if you break it down by month and by quarter. So I hope this video was useful to you, and hope to see you next time.